Welcome to BigFoeNation. This is BigFoe. If you want to follow us on any kind of social media, it's at BigFoeNation. And if you want to follow us directly or donate to what we're doing because you support it, you can do that directly on the website. That's BigFoeNation.com, BigFoe Nation.com. So, for episode 4, we have a very crucial name. We're switching over from philosophers to flatterers, as defined in Plato's dialogue Gorgias. So flatterers go by many other names: persuaders, orators, rhetoricians. So a good place to start with these is Gorgias, where the namesake of Plato's dialogue that serves as a central polemic in our discussions. Excuse me. Gorgias is a real person. Gorgias of Leontini, Italy. And he was a contemporary of Socrates. He was a teacher of rhetoric and a paid public speaker. His persona, obviously, you would know by now that he was personified by Plato in Gorgias. So the conjunction of those two, the writing of Plato and Gorgias' own writings, we can see very clearly the what would become the future archetype of the flatterer. Now, many of those that followed Gorgias were, in many ways, less humble than Gorgias, because in his own lifetime he never tried to portray his teaching of rhetoric as something that could be that could stand in the place of or give any guidance towards virtue. So in terms of making people good people, he never thought that his ideas could make people good people. But if you look at the people that would follow him, that would come later admiring what he had done, oftentimes they would actually do exactly that. They would take his teaching of rhetoric and apply it to morality. And as we will see in future videos, I believe that a lot of what would amount to Enlightenment thinking is the idea of taking the ideas of Gorgias and applying them to morality, is allowing the teachers of rhetoric to teach morality. So Gorgias is most known for 2 specific works. So he has a writing called On Non-Being, where he lays out the 3 principles that anything you might mention is nothing. If it were something, it wouldn't be knowable, or it would be unknowable, however you want to say that. And if it were knowable, it could not be made evident to others. So the conclusions that you can get from that is that, that's as far away from those other 3 principles that we were discussing in previous videos and also on the website and other things associated with BigFoeNation. The idea of ideal judgment, the universe being lawful, the forms having a tendency towards ideals which are reflections of that lawfulness, and the changes that are lawful reflecting the process of the ideals tending towards, the forms tending towards ideals. So that in this case, it's a denying of universal law, or it's saying that if there is universal law, it's not something that has any bearing on what we should be putting our attention towards, if we were had any concern about whether our actions were futile or not. So that's what you get from on non-being. Anything you might mention is nothing. If it were something, it would be unknowable. If it were knowable, it could not be made evident to others. And then his next very significant writing, or set of, in his set of performances, is his encomium of Helen, which is basically a defense of Helen, a strange defense of her, but not that she shouldn't be defended, but his method of defense. So if you don't know Helen of Troy, she's the reason that the war starts between Troy and this group of nations that joined together to crush it. So his idea is talking about how she was persuaded, and it's basically talking about the powers of persuasion and how these powers are like magic and witchcraft, and a person like her is just a victim to it. It's so powerful that there's no reason that can overcome it. So it's between that, he takes down his position is in opposition to the idea that universal ideas could be discovered and or even stumbled upon by anybody, even a slave. So with those two, as well as what his tombstone featured, which was, if I can pull that up, can't find that, I'll be honest. But we'll put that somewhere else on the website. It's already on the website, but I can't think of it right now, what this quote was. Yeah. So if you go in and look at his encomium of Helen, and you look at how he exalts rhetoric and the powers he gives it, and his disregard of anything that could go against it, that combined with his concept of knowledge not being transferable or discoverable, put together is serves as basically the basis of any attack on ideal judgment. Also, it's important to note that Gorgias is no scrub. He's the king of the Sophists, and he was very influential over society generally. Even people like Plato were influenced by him. His writing style, his idea, the idea of creating speeches that are tempered for the temperament of your audience, or having, we got the Reddit now, everybody does the Ask Me Anythings. That's really was created by Gorgias. He was the architect of that. Anything that you would say, the foundation of what you would call public speaking and all the good parts of it. If you're a public speaker performer, then all of the sell, the best car salesman, the original car salesman, takes as his sensei Gorgias of Leontini. What's happening, people? This is Big Foe. Wanted to add one more thing to our little discussion here on Gorgias, because that little brain fart that I had there was kind of crucial, and the part that was missing is kind of important. So, on Gorgias' tombstone, the following is written: "No mortal has yet found a finer art than Gorgias to train the souls for the contests of virtue." Now, that's very important, because as I was saying, Gorgias himself never claimed to be able to turn his rhetoric into virtue teaching. Right? So, and even in Plato's depiction of Gorgias, he's far more humble than Callicles or Polus. Right? So these are the three things that after he died, so including this what you're seeing written on his tomb, which is kind of a sign of how his followers were viewing him, is that they were actually going to do exactly that. And their method of living out the message engraved in his tombstone, "No mortal has yet found a finer art than Gorgias to train the souls for the contests of virtue," was to resurrect his writing on non-being, which stated that, the exact words were, nothing is anything you could mention is nothing, and even if it could be something you couldn't teach, no one could teach it to anyone. If you could learn it, you couldn't teach it to anyone. You can go back to the beginning of this podcast to get a good quote on that. But the main point is that the three things combined, his first writing on non-being, which rejects the idea of thinking or the utility of thinking or making discoveries or science, and his defense of Helen, where he exalts rhetoric, oratory, persuasion as something so much higher than reason, such that someone endowed with reason, an aristocratic princess, Helen, or queen, whichever it was, is no match for the rhetoric. So that concept, combined with the mantra on his tomb, is what you have where Aristotle takes it over and continues for others to lay upon that foundation. But it's pretty clear that he inspired a whole movement that would for centuries be opposing the foundation of what was laid down by the philosophers. So I think we'll leave it there.